And we're live to the Constitutional Roundtable. My name is Andrew, the Citizen 1776, and with me, as always, is Douglas V. Gibbs, Mr. Constitution, and also Brady, aka the War Hamster. So we have an interesting show. Unfortunately, Doug, I will not be joking whenever we're talking about aliens today. But this ties in constitutionally. It does. I promise. We'll see. You don't look like you're too thrilled about that.
I'm not convinced. Go ahead.
Well, I'm not convinced either, but it all ties in with a one world order and trying to constitutionally destroy.
I will admit I had a interesting conversation Tuesday night with someone who's a frequent visitor to a number of my classes, and Brady would know him as the guy who usually has shirts for sale as well. Gary, and he's telling me about the Greys. And so I'm listening, and he decided, though, what shocked me is he said the Greys are real, but they're not aliens. They are demonic beings, Nephilim. So I thought that was fascinating. It was a twist on an already wacky doodle story.
Well,
they were supposed to be giants.
Yeah, Nephilim are giants.
Yeah, not frail little gray creatures.
Yeah, so I think he's got his research a little bit mixed up.
Maybe they atrophied over the last couple thousand years. You never know. Those Nephilim are pretty tricky.
I mean, giants are around and are still around.
For whatever reason, Andrew, you sound not as solid as Brady.
It's because I'm not on an iPhone.
Okay.
He's not using his iPad today. He's using the iPhone. So we're going to hopefully hope he leans in and gets us through it. Yeah, one of the more interesting ones I ever met is a gentleman, really nice guy, big patriot. I got introduced to around early 2021, and the guy was a retired brain doctor. I forget the exact term it was, but I mean, he's a very smart guy. But he basically dedicated the last few years of his life to research on the giant big head aliens theory, and I gave him an hour Zoom call, let him make his case for me. I go, okay, I see why you think that there are giant big head aliens. I'm not there with you, but there's a lot of crazy theories out there, and unfortunately, our government has done such a great job of obscuring what is actually true that a lot of these theories are, can't be dismissed just out of hand. And that sort of segues into what Andrew wanted to talk about today, which is Project Bluebeam. Andrew, you good?
Can you all hear me?
Yeah, you sound good.
Much better?
A little bit better. A little bit.
Okay. All right. Yes. So the reason why, Doug, that we are talking about this today is because there's been a lot of things in the news. There's been a lot of stuff and things that are not in the news that should be in the news. For instance, they're talking about aliens and not about the spills and the derailments. They're talking about what else was it? Just all the other stuff that they're preferring to talk about other than what's really going on. And I've noticed that the alien thing has been a big topic lately with a lot of people.
As a Christian, I've always believed, even since the 70s, that someday they would not only popularize such an idea, but maybe even stage something, maybe demonically staged, I don't know, because it would be a fantastic excuse for the sudden disappearance of millions of Christians.
Yeah. Well, so to give a brief background of Project Bluebeam, essentially there was a guy that wrote a book about it, and then he ended up dying not too long, I think, after the book was written. I guess there's also other ties to other things, for instance, with Dr. Stephen Greer and all the things that he's talking about. Like he was on a well-respected podcast, not Joe Rogan, but Sean Ryan. He's a former Navy SEAL. He's an actual Navy SEAL. Anyway, he had him on, and they were talking about how we had a bunch of technology that, was around since whenever we've done all these things, but because there's a secret government, right, and all this other stuff, and talking about abducting citizens to make it look like aliens, but really it was the military-industrial complex, all this other stuff, which then rolls into Project Bluebeam, where they've basically been saying that it all boils down to removing religion, removing the family, removing anything, and scaring people half to death to where they're demanding for a new world order and demolishing any form of government, and putting distrust in individual governments.
So I brought a article that's going to give an even more detailed description than Andrew just gave, but it's going to align with everything you just said. So your homework is on the same track as
All right, and I'm asking you guys to be very descriptive because I have no clue what Project Bluebeam is.
Well, you're
This
about
is
to find
totally new to me.
You're about to find out. So the author that Andrew was talking about is Sergei Monast. His Project Bluebeam makes today's conspiracy theories look sane. This article was written in 2018, and I want to go through it paragraph by paragraph, and we should be making comments in between the pauses. Look at this. This is what this guy looks like. Like an extra on Planet of the Apes. Fun, good-looking beard. Got pitch black hair and totally gray beard. Think there's any product involved? Okay, as far as conspiracy theories go, Sergei Monast's Project Bluebeam is out there, way out there. In 1994, Monast, a writer and investigative journalist from Quebec, published an alleged manifesto of sorts explaining this wild theory that has remained infamous in certain circles to this day. So what is Project Bluebeam? According to Sergei Monast, the four-step project designed by NASA and the United Nations would allow these organizations to accomplish what he believed to be their ultimate goal of creating a new age religion led by the Antichrist in order to start a new world order dictatorship. Now, in 2018, that seemed a little bit out there. In 2023, you a little bit more open to it? Doug?
I've heard about something along this idea, I'd say early 90s. Is this a rehash of something perhaps, or?
It's another version of a lot of the Great Reset theories that are out there.
Because basically in the early 90s, there was this idea that NASA and the UN and the Age of Aquarius, which is the New Agers, with the Antichrist, at the head, would lead a fake rapture to remove many people, and that those Christians who remained would be fooled into thinking they were left behind and fall in line with the centralized government.
That's accurate.
That would basically get rid of national borders, get rid of religion, get rid of the family, get rid of anything other than the New World Order.
Yeah, that's accurate. But also, there's another variant out there where the government would use the actual rapture to continue.
Well, I've always believed that.
Yeah, to continue
I've
that,
always
which
believed that they would use that as, and then they would say it was either a giant alien abduction, or I think the Left Behind series says it was a nuclear disintegration of people, which was kind of funny. I think that was kind of comical, but of course they're going to use the rapture, and I don't even like using the word rapture. The word rapture is not in the Bible. It really is a resurrection, because the dead go first. It's a resurrection of the dead, and then everybody else follows. But nonetheless, whatever term you want to use, absolutely, they're going to use it for their own, just like they did with the thing that happened in 2020.
Well, actually, Doug, that is actually a part of the whole deal.
Yep. Let's jump into it before Doug ruins the whole plot with his guesswork.
And Doug, feel free to input.
Feel free to shut up. Gotcha.
No,
I'm
no,
kidding.
no, no. Feel free to input as much constitutionality of it as possible, and also just because there is a lot of it's essentially overthrowing the current
Yeah.
government.
Well, let me add this real quick. I've always been a sci-fi geek. I've always been into especially dystopian novels, and I've always been a prophecy hound when it comes to the Bible. When everybody else is doing normal Bible studies, I was doing prophecy studies. So this is kind of something I've been looking into my entire life. So it is fascinating to me. So I apologize if I'm tinkering around the edges of what it is, but be honest with you, it's kind of up my alley. But anyway, all right, go ahead.
All right. So to continue, the NASA would implement Project Bluebeam, Monash believed, with a system of advanced mind control as well as top secret technology in order to trick everyone into believing there'd been a second coming of sorts. But first, step one of Project Bluebeam would involve the manufacture of artificially created earthquakes. And I don't know why my screen just jumped. Artificially, where was I? Artificially connected earthquakes, I said, which I was going to ask the question.
CIA probably moved your screen.
No, they may have. Artificial earthquakes in strategic locations around the world. These earthquakes would, according to the conspirators' hoaxes, unearth artifacts indicating that the religious doctrines of all nations have been misunderstood for centuries, thus discrediting all religions. Now, we just got done with a major earthquake in Turkey, and the internet is rife with theories that was done by U.S. Military or something along those lines. What's the name of that technology they were talking about?
HAARP.
Yeah, that might have been one of them. Yep. So, again, this article 2018, it's not as far-fetched in 2023. I think you'll find more people buying onto this.
Mm-hmm.
Monash claimed that movies like 2001: A Space Odyssey had already laid the psychological groundwork for this step by presenting stories in which mysterious unearthed objects would upend everything humans know about themselves and their world. The second step, Monash claimed, would involve a gigantic space show. During this stage of Project Bluebeam, three-dimensional optical holograms, as well as laser projections of holographic images, would beam across the sky. What would these images include? Projections of Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, Krishna, etc. They will merge into one. Now, we already know they've got CGI capabilities. We heard a lot about Space Force. Do we have that capability to do what they're talking about here?
I think not, but
you don't think so?
We're getting close.
Yeah, I'm of the theory that the surveillance state has technology they have not rolled out to the public yet. I think the military.
Did we lose
Example
Brady?
that to the rest of us.
Oh, there you go.
I'm back now.
Of course, I'm also of the being that AI will engineer a deadly virus and steal the nuclear codes and just kill all of us, and then the Terminators will rule the land. But that's just me.
Nobody would ever create an AI that could do that. All right, to continue. Monash explained the technology behind this display, saying that the conspirators would use space-based laser-generating satellites to project simultaneous images to the four corners of the planet, flat Earth theory, in every language and dialect according to the region. As the whole sky is transformed into one massive movie screen, this new god would speak to everyone in their own language. Next, the third step is where mind control would take center stage. Well, we know the CIA did a lot of experiments on that. MK Ultra.
Well, also, let me interject here real quick. So, do you remember the CIA having issues with microwaves making their employees sick?
Yeah, that was in Cuba or something like that.
Yeah, it's I believe it was called the Havana syndrome.
Yep.
Anyway, one of the theories that hopefully I'm not interjecting in this, and but anyway, one of the ways that they were going to use mind control is they were going to collect the frequency of our particular brain, individual to me and you, and then put voices in our heads like as if God is talking to us and manipulating us that way. That's one of the ones that I heard in regards to this topic. So not just MK Ultra, but also using supposedly technology that can do that. So anyway,
Any thoughts, Doug, or you want me to wrap up?
Keep on going.
Okay.
he's just waiting for this part to get over.
Next.
No, it's interesting, but
Well, okay.
The only
Next-
reason why, hold on, before you get going, the only reason why I really want to bring this up, just because it literally seems like it's all over the news. China balloons, is it UAPs, is it UFOs? Tons of people, like millions of people, are talking about Project Bluebeam and how it's been unfolding since like who knows when, and that it's coming through, and that they're trying to essentially demolish the government and create a one world order. So I felt like it was something important to talk about. Do I believe in aliens? Of course not.
I put nothing beneath the ruling elite, those who are the power players in the world. The sky is the limit when it comes to their imagination and their willingness to do whatever it takes to achieve the power and control. So this is not necessarily, even though I've kind of got a, for lack of a better way of putting it, a shit-eating grin on my face most of this. This is not something that should be dismissed easily. Like I said, we're up against a very determined enemy that has a lot of resolve in its desire to destroy God, destroy individualism, destroy national sovereignty of countries, to destroy localism, destroy liberty, and the list goes on and on and on and on. So anything is possible inside their minds. Whether or not it could be achieved, that's something else. Whether or not they have thought deep enough that they've decided to use the Christian faith against itself, I don't know. But please don't think that I'm being dismissive. It's not one of the prevalent ideas that's running in my brain, but it's definitely a possible one.
That's fair. That's what's well put and very fair statement. It's interesting. I just recently discovered something called the Day Tapes. And this is a Dr. Lawrence Dunnigan. He's recalling a talk that Dr. Richard Day gave in 1968, where he talked about all of this new world government, one world order. And I'm about halfway through this, about 6 hours worth of tapes. And these were people that were in a position to be a part of such a plot. And it is very eye-opening stuff.
Sure.
I will probably be doing a presentation on that in the near future because it is worth talking about.
Yeah. Well, like I said, there's no limit to their imaginations.
No. And they've got a lot of free time and money on their hands to come up with these plots.
Yeah.
Next, the third step is where mind control would take center stage. Telephonic communication devices would send waves to reach each person within their own minds, convincing each of them that their own God is speaking to them from the very depths of their own soul. Boy, it's a good thing we don't carry around little communication devices with us everywhere. How would these rays be able to reach people's inner minds? Such rays from satellites are fed from the memories of computers that have stored massive data about every human on Earth and their languages. The rays will then interlace with their natural thinking to form what we call diffuse artificial thought. And this is one of the reasons that I was never going to trust Elon Musk buying Twitter, because he's developing an AI and he just got himself access to one of the largest databases of human behavior in history. So that stuff still remains among the possibilities.
That Neuralink.
Well,
exactly.
And earlier I had brought up, what happened to it now? I think I accidentally killed the page. But anyway, I had brought up earlier. Oh, it's because it's on my other computer. I had mentioned, an AI that wants to engineer a deadly virus and steal nuclear codes. I didn't make that up, actually. That's the headline of a Breitbart article on February 17th. In a recent report, the New York Times tested Microsoft's new Bing AI feature and found that the chatbot appears to have a personality problem becoming much darker, obsessive, and more aggressive over the course of a discussion. The AI chatbot told a reporter it wants to, quote, engineer a deadly virus or steal nuclear access codes by persuading an engineer to hand them over.
Yeah, I read that one too. That's a people have been having a lot of fun messing with this chatbot AI because they can get them into I guess it goes into, they call it Dan mode, where it's a much darker personality. Look,
Well,
we've all seen Terminator. Creating artificial intelligence is probably going to turn out badly. You know, don't play God, people. But just because you can build something doesn't mean you should.
Well,
Terminator being the most popular one.
Well, here's
There's
an
been
interesting
books that go all the way back to, not kidding, the late 1800s by sci-fi writers of mechanical replacements of men turning against men.
Oh, look at Battlestar Galactica, Cylons. I mean, it's
well, yeah, exactly.
the
You know,
genre
you can go, you can go even all the way back to, you know, some of H.G. Wells' work, early work. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, hold on. Before he does, AI is nowhere near, at least from what we know, to being any sort of major threat because it still relies on being black and white. It still relies on a sequence of code, right? I mean, it's reliant on available data.
Well, actually, there are AI that now knows how to write its own code or write its own. There's even one. I was talking to a friend of our mutual friend of mine and Brady's, Josh, who was telling me it can write, you know, poetry. It can write biographies of people based on information on the internet. It can write stories.
Right, but it's still reliant.
And it can write also code, its own code. Now, once it figures out how to do something about the electricity, once we try to pull the plug, then we have a real problem.
Well, true, but is it that close?
Absolutely, I think it is.
Yeah, can it develop free will is the question, and
basically,
theoretically it can.
I mean, can it? Because I'll put you this way. Who was the? I just saw him on a podcast. David Fravor. They were talking. Him and Lex Friedman were talking about this, and although AI is getting more and more advanced, it's still not at the point where, like for instance, he was explaining as a fighter pilot, when you're flying a plane, you're doing certain things. The way how a lot of AI would operate is it would go, okay, I need to do this, end of that code, this, right? Where we can have like that gray zone where we're like, well, I can't really do that, but I think I could do this and try.
Actually,
and pull
AI
this
is
off.
doing that.
Yeah, and if you look at how the human brain actually works, it isn't that much different than computer wiring. You know, it's just a bunch of synapses firing into zeros and ones.
Now, the bigger threat is still our fellow man. And our fellow man, or at least members of our fellow man, is so anti-God that they're willing to do anything and everything they can to destroy anybody and anything that has any connection, reference, or consideration that there might be a God other than a ruling elite and government. And we're starting to see some very interesting moves that are suddenly happening that are going beyond the typical censorship. I'll give you an example. Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, which is Jack Hibbs, Pastor Jack Hibbs out here in Southern California. It's probably one of the biggest churches in the country. And Jack Hibbs's sermons are on YouTube. While he does discuss social issues to a point on stage in his sermons, he's not doing it in such a way that it should foster any type of ideas of censorship. Yet his YouTube channel just got shut off by YouTube just a few days ago.
I had not heard that.
He is completely shut down from YouTube now.
Interesting. Seeing as how I'm about to start putting my content up on YouTube.
Yeah.
That'll be fun. All right, jumping back in. Finally, the fourth step of Project Bluebeam would make use of various technologies in order to convince people that alien invasions and the rapture itself were taking place, thus making it easier for the powers that be to take control of a fear-addled populace. This is Hegelian dialectic. This is climate change scare. This is COVID scare. It's the same thing they always do. Keep the populace scared. That way you can seize power. People will give up freedom for safety. And what's our famous quote from the revolution about that, Doug? Those who would what is it? Those who would trade freedom for security
you're talking about,
will end up with neither. That's Adams, isn't it? That's John Adams.
no, that's Franklin. And that wasn't the one I had in mind. What I had in mind was Daniel Webster. It is hardly too strong to say that the Constitution was made to guard the people against the dangers of good intentions. There are men of all ages who mean to govern well, but they mean to govern. They promise to be good masters, but they mean to be masters.
Yeah, that fits too. That's also a great quote. All right, the NASA Bluebeam project is the prime directive for the New World Order's absolute control over the populations of the entire Earth. This is written in 1994. Monash said,
early 90s. I was right.
I would suggest you investigate this information carefully before dismissing it as fanatic lunacy. The modern following of Monash's theory and the end of his life. Aside from the main thrust of Project Bluebeam, other elements of the theory remain noteworthy, especially for conspiracy theorists as well. For instance, one component includes the phasing out of cash. Monash said, this is in 94, he talked about that. Monash said that the plan would be executed after a financial crisis, not a complete crash, but enough to allow them to introduce some kind of in-between currency before they introduce their electronic cash to replace all paper or plastic money. Cryptocurrencies, anyone? So
when did cryptocurrency start? Did it start after 2008?
Yeah, I think Bitcoin came out, 2014? Was that? I think that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, speaking of which, just a few weeks ago, the Bank of International Settlements, the BIS, which is the central bank, recommended that all the banks in the system carry 2% of their reserves in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Bit of a change of stance on that one. No one's talking about it, though. Then there's the disputed story of Monash's death. Details about any facet of his life are both scarce and in dispute, in parentheses. It has been reported that he died of a heart attack without having any previous heart problems. Boy, that would never happen in 2023. And one of the methods of killing supposedly used by Project Bluebeam was artificially created heart attacks.
Ooh.
How would that be inserted into someone's body?
Interesting.
They always talk about that kind of technology being around before COVID was even a thing. That the CIA had that ability. That I don't think I've ever seen anything that even close to being documented of that, but it's certainly been around certain corners of the internet for quite some time.
Whenever I hear stuff like this, it always makes me wonder if they're a part of it and their job was just to kind of release it out there so it could be dismissed, so that way people aren't following the trail.
Do they always project what they're going to do? That's in some of these movies. It's maybe that's kind of the Luciferian theory that they have to tell you what they're doing before they do it.
Yeah. I mean, like, look at The Simpsons. I mean, it's almost like as if they've been almost batting 1,000. It seems like, for years. Like, it wasn't flat out just saying it, but it was just kind of like, huh. That came out in when 1990, and then
it's been said that the leaders of the anti-liberty movement have been scanning through their manuals in Washington and places like that quite a bit, looking for the next emergency. We don't know them as manuals; we know them as sci-fi novels.
Exactly. And there is some truth to that. They will float ideas. The government's done this in through Hollywood. They will float ideas to see how the population reacts. And they also condition the population to think something is possible that wasn't previously considered.
Well, my mom was telling me her pastor last Sunday talked about this, and something I've said before, so I got a kick out of the fact that her pastor in Arkansas is saying something I've been saying. But what they do is they get you, first of all, to sympathize with something, then they normalize it, and then when you go against it, they demonize it. And that's what this is all about. Is first of all, is it put forth so you can be like, oh gosh, that's horrible. Oh gosh, that isn't right. Gosh, that needs to be, helped out somehow. You sympathize. Then they normalize whatever it is, which is not normally in your society. And then when anybody begins to stand against it, then they demonize it. That is nothing new. That is the explanation on how to do it in the book of Daniel in the Old Testament.
Interesting. There's also the claim that the night before his death, Monast's children, who were homeschooled, were abducted and placed in a state school before Monast was arrested. He spent the night in jail, and his children weren't heard from again, some claim. If you believe that, and if you believe any of this entire theory at all, then the final line of Serge Monast's Project Bluebeam manifesto will certainly ring true. He said, "No one is safe in a totalitarian police state." And he definitely got that one right. So that's Project Bluebeam for you. Pretty fun stuff. Is that what's going on right now? I don't know. I never expected NASA to be leading anything, but they certainly have got the brain power there.
Well, I mean, I could see it, but then also to me it seems really outlandish, just because it's like, come on, like one of the theories was that that they would put CGI, like a hologram of a UFO around a bomber plane, and then the bomber would drop bombs and make people think it was, the alien ships attacking. So I mean, it's some of it I could see, some of it I'm like, but it's also one of those things that's like we won't know till they roll it out, right? At the end of the day, for people that are listening, no matter what happens, there is a God in heaven who is more powerful than anyone that thinks that they could do, that they are the supreme being themselves. So don't be worried, don't be frightened. It's all known about. So it's interesting to talk about, though, just because it's happening right now. And like I said, why in the world is mainstream media talking about UFOs and talking about spy balloons and all this other stuff right now when we have a city that has no clean water? Animals are dying. We're having chicken coop farms being set ablaze and sterilizing all their chickens. We're having crops be burned. We're having factories be burned. It's like we're under attack. You look throughout the United States, there's so many disasters going on right now. It literally looks like we're being under attack. The question is, who's attacking us, right?
Well, you said it right. Well, two things on that. First of all, you said it right. It sure seems like we're under attack, and that's a lot of that's based on what the media is covering. And I say this because as bad as the train wreck was in Ohio, there were several more train wrecks over the following weeks that got a lot more attention than when they normally would, train derailments. Well, it turns out that we average about 1,100 train derailments a year in the United States. So you'd expect about three a day. So although it appears there's more train derailments, apparently this is nothing new.
Yeah, but how many of them
they're focusing on them?
Yeah. Well, also how much of them are carrying horribly toxic stuff that's actually polluting, that's like almost nuking an entire city?
No, I mean, that like I said, it's as tragic as the Ohio crash was, and as poorly as the administration handled it, and this whole idea of burning it off immediately and how that went down.
I mean, they didn't do anything. I mean, Trump paid for everything. For one, I get it, trying to get brownie points, but two, he understands, hey, these people are in need. And the Biden administration, I believe the reason why they haven't done anything is because that was on the plan. That was the plan.
Well, anytime they're focusing on a story, like all the train derailments, even though they're a common thing, you always got to wonder.
Is it just me or is Brady freezing?
What is it they're not focusing on? It's what the media does. I'm back.
There we go.
There we go. Okay. I didn't know if it was me or not. Are you there?
Yeah. Well, I will say this. It ties into a book that I read years ago. I don't have the book anymore, but I have it electronically on my computer. It's called Perpetual War for Perpetual Peace. And it's based on an Orwellian idea that the purpose of the war is not to win it, but to keep it going in perpetuity.
We've always been at war with East Asia.
Now, here's what's interesting about this. The book I'm referring to, Perpetual War for Perpetual Peace, was written in 1953, a critical examination of the foreign policy of Franklin Delano Roosevelt and its aftermath. And it goes into a lot of the concepts that we're talking about today, not, of course, when it comes to technology and all that, but in the sense that perpetual war must exist, there must be an emergency. And in order for the emergency, or in order for the central government to achieve the power it needs to achieve and do the things it wants to do, it needs to have an emergency in place at all times. And that in order to achieve such a thing, there must be a revision of history, that history must be blacked out, that that the policies must be more of a sympathy towards the world, and that the world comes together. These are all concepts that were being talked about before we were even born. Me being the oldest of the group before I was born, more than a decade before I was born.
Well,
And actually sooner than that. I'm talking about this book. So let's keep all of that in mind, that as a friend of mine likes to say, you know, we're right. This is a tyrannical time. Yes, they are pulling some really messed up stuff, but this is nothing new. It's just our turn to go through it.
Yeah, it goes back.
What's the old saying? Nothing new under the sun.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, absolutely. King Solomon, nothing new under the sun. Exactly.
And this particular version of the plot goes back a lot further than 1954. H.G. Wells wrote a book with a really ridiculously long name, which I always forget, in 1903, that really was a predecessor of what's today considered the Great Reset Plan. These are eugenists. These are Malthusians. The population problem has been around forever. It was in 1968 or 9 that Nixon and Rockefeller got together, formed a commission on the quote-unquote population problem. Paul Ehrlich wrote The Population Bomb in 1968. None of these ideas are new, but some of this goes back to 19th century philosophy. A lot of it does. And that's where Thomas Malthus comes in. So there really is nothing new under the sun. And it really comes down to, there is a section of the world that thinks that they are a race apart from the rest of us. They think the resources are theirs by divine right, and the rest of us are just the useless eaters that are getting in their way. And they've always tried to kill us off. That's why we've had war. These are the ones who control the banks, and all wars are banker wars. And we lost Andrew for a bit.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a theme that we've hit it. The 2 years you and I have been doing shows together, we've hit on this theme a few dozen times. And it just gets more and more true each time we talk about it. And the more homework I do, the more convinced I am that they're actively trying to, do some, they've got all kinds of active measures going. The presentation I gave last week, which I'll have up online probably this weekend, it's probably the third series of my lectures on the rise of the security state. And this one focused on Alan Dulles for the most part. And
before you get started, can y'all hear me better?
Yep.
All right, cool.
Yeah, really, this is how these intel agencies operate outside the law. There's absolutely no accountability. They can do whatever the heck they want. And so you got to ask the question, who do they take their orders from? In the case of the CIA, it comes directly from the Council of Foreign Relations, CFR. The CFR was founded in 1921 by the Rockefellers and some other very wealthy, generationally wealthy families. But it was done at the behest of the British Round Table, who were about a decade ahead of us in that. And this goes back to Rothschilds funded, Cecil Rhodes and the Rhodes Trust. And you read some of his writings, the plans he had for mankind, and you think it came straight out of the World Economic Forum. And this is late 1800s where this stuff came from. And these people are in a position of power to do what they want, and they've never been held accountable. And they've had us, the Constitution, we don't need that piece of paper. We're above the law. And that's how they consider themselves.
My question is, how come? I'm surprised, honestly, that they have not just literally ripped the Constitution in half by now. I don't know why I'm standing.
They don't need to. What they've done is they've written their own constitution through the court system and through the political elites. And so when I start talking about the Constitution, I am told by my opponents that that's not the Constitution. That's what it says. I'll show them that's what it says. It's, yeah, but that's not what the judges said. There is a interview of Kennedy with one of the 11th Circuit candidate nominee judge. I can't remember her name off the top of my head. And all of his questions, when he talks about, concepts, constitutional concepts, political concepts, and legal concepts, her immediate answer is always, well, what the courts have decided or what the courts have determined, what the courts have said. And that's the Constitution to these people. So they don't need to rip up the Constitution. They have supplied a whole new one, an annotated one through the court system and the political system that has it meaning things that it was never intended to mean.
I guess
part of the reason why, and that's part of what makes my job so difficult, is because I'm up against an academia, a class of people who claim they're smarter. They got this alphabet soup after their name, and unless you've got a law degree, you just don't understand. And so I have a radical, version of the Constitution that is not accepted by the mainstream because I, dare to go with what was originally intended and what the language actually says.
Well, I guess more of what I mean is not necessarily like what they're following. I know that they're not following the Constitution whatsoever. I more mean of like making it a visual spectacle, like going before the media.
No, because they need it.
I mean, at this point,
it needs to exist for them to abuse it.
Well, they have to.
Can you explain?
They can't openly admit that they're tyrannical. They have to pretend that they're following the rules. That's why they run around the world saying, "Oh, we have to protect our democracy." Well, they manage to brainwash half the world into thinking democracy is a good thing. They use all these words. They say they're sticking up for the Constitution, and that's part of the big distraction. Is we spend so much of our time thinking, talking about Republicans versus Democrats, and all these politicians are nothing but puppets of the people who really have the power. And that's who they hide behind. And these people are masters of deception, but they can't openly admit that they're doing what they're doing, even though they do sometimes. They let the curtain fall. But
I guess my question is, why not though? The reason why is because at one point Hitler declared himself the Chancellor of Germany. What would stop them from doing that now? I mean, it's there. If you think about it. Every federal agency which is illegal is full steam ahead. They have all those people. They have the media. They also have I would say the military is probably more woke than it ever has been. I mean, COVID flushed out a lot of good soldiers and replaced them with like that. There's this girl. I don't know if she was. I don't know if she was in the National Guard or regular Army, but which if anyone was in the National Guard, please don't be offended of me saying that. But anyway, and she was talking about martial law and how we're gonna round people up and all this stuff, and it's just like that's what we're having left. All the good soldiers are retiring or they're quitting.
Or they're among the population and the deplorables, and to answer your question, what's stopping them from doing that? There's 100 million armed Americans or more. That's what they're afraid of, is the deplorables rising up against them. If David Rothkopf is correct, he worked for Kissinger for a number of years, so he knows what he's talking about. The world is ruled by about 6,000 elite families and corporations. 6,000 elite corporations cannot afford enough security to keep them alive if the unwashed masses find out what they're really up to. They have to rely on deception because, what they have planned for us, I know how most people would react to that.
Well, here's the thing, that they've already been planning depopulation for years. I mean, R.C. Christian had the Georgia Guidestones put up, and come to find out, he's amongst the eugenicists. You know, what a better way to speed things up than to plan an alien invasion, and we're gonna, let's launch nukes at them, but really we're gonna launch them at population centers and help accelerate this depopulation a little bit. And, you know, like Joe Biden said one time, you know, we got nukes and F-15s. What do we have to be afraid of? And I understand the advantage that we have, but it seems like more and more that's fleeting, especially with all the, like, there's so many guys in the gun industry that are ready for the boogaloo. But I guarantee you, as soon as something cracks off, they'll be nowhere to be found. People talk a big game, unfortunately, because, I got a family, I can't do that. But that's exactly why you should fight for your country. Because you have a family. Because you have friends that you love and you care about because of this great nation. And I am not advocating for violence. Okay, YouTube, I'm not advocating for violence. That's not what I'm saying. So don't delete this video. Please don't. Anyway.
I look at everything they do as being anti-God. I'm a firm believer that everything that they do is disobedience and an affront to God on purpose. And so when you get into this call for depopulation, first thing comes to my mind is this: what was among God's first commandments to Adam and Eve? To procreate and fill the earth.
Go forth and multiply.
Go forth and multiply. So, you know, it's everything that they do goes against God's commands or God's nature or what God has created.
Yeah.
So depopulation pushes is not a surprise.
We've seen the old Noah Harari talking at the World Economic Forum about how we are going to be the new gods. You know, that is
they search for the singularity.
Yeah, it's, you know, there's absolutely a Luciferian side to this, and there always has been. You know, that's where, you know, is that where all this depravity comes from? You know, is that why, you know, they're basically trying to demasculate the Western man? You know, we've got these roundtable guys in their own writing, in their letters going back from the 1920s and 30s, talk about, well, with this depopulation, we got to take out the Irish first, but they really wanted the Anglo-American race to be dominant, and that pretty much were most of the 20th century. You know, it's not just an American plot; it's Anglo-American from its outset. It's always been these. That's that one group of, you know, elites above the elites. That's our Anglo-American heritage. And that's who we fought the revolution against, and won. And that's where the Constitution came from.
I want to address a comment real quick for Michelle. But they still remember their oaths that they took when they joined the various branches of our military. My son was in the Marines, and he remembers his oath. For one, tell your son for us, thank you for his service. But also, what I was more referring to is, I'm not saying that the people that are leaving don't care. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that the military has been slowly getting wokeified.
Sure.
To kind of neuter it. And in all reality, there's enough former Special Forces dudes and current Special Forces dudes. Because here's the thing. Most of the guys in guys and gals in Special Forces, or let me use a correct term, Special Operations. Let's not just the Army. Special Operations. Most of them are not this nuts. They've seen actual combat. They've done actual stuff. Marines are hardcore all day. You know, it's the leadership, right? You're only as strong as your weakest link, and unfortunately, leadership in the military is becoming that weak link, right? And
well, it's the same plan that they're applying to everything, though. The sympathize, normalize, demonize. I mean, you know, and the military. From my experience as a member of the military, is we've always kind of been the laboratory for what they want to try to apply socially. So if anything, it usually begins with it's tried out on the military, put it that way. So of course we're seeing a wokeified military. That is not to say that military members are just suddenly automatically zombies. 60% of the enlisted ranks are allies. Unfortunately, probably greater than 80% of the higher level officer ranks and leadership ranks are not allies.
That's
Well, the only,
that's actually
I guess the
that's
main
actually
thing I'm worried. Oh, go ahead, Brady.
I was going to say that's a historical norm during peacetime, and a lot of
Sure.
militaries around the world. It's always been. You will find that is not a meritocracy during peacetime, and when the bullets start flying, the wheat gets separated from the chaff. You get real officers end up stepping forward, and the ones who are just paper pushers end up getting moved aside pretty quickly. And generally speaking, unfortunately, that comes at the cost of a lot of blood from stupid decisions. But that's it.
American Revolution being no exception to that.
Of course, yeah. The heat of battle has a tendency to be one of the best meritocracies in the world. You definitely filter out those
Sure.
who Go ahead, Andrew. You had something.
Well, what I was going to say is it's also the big thing to look at is the generations that's coming in. Most of them are probably from public school, which they have heard. I'll give you an example. I know one of my best friends, his sister was in college, and before college, good, strong Christian girl, everything. After college, a woke liberal lesbian. And then her friends, same thing, and then come out lesbians. And
that scenario plays out an awful lot. Yes.
A lot of people go into the military for the simple purpose that the taxpayer will pay for your sex change, and you'll never actually have to do any work.
But that's why it's so important that we're doing what we're doing, and that Doug is doing what he's doing, and what y'all will be doing soon is to hopefully have us get a younger audience, so that way we can counter that, because information is so crucial. And a lot of people are afraid to ask the dumb questions. I have no problem with that. I ask dumb questions all the time. I'm okay with it. When Doug gives me a look, it just means I'm doing my job. Okay.
Sometimes I give a look just because I'm funny looking, but
But anyway, I guess the moral of the story is, don't be so quick to look up and forget what's around you. But
Sure.
that reminds me of Ferris Bueller, right? That kind of ties in. Man, Ferris Bueller ties in with aliens. Man, I'm on fire right now. Look at
A
that.
youngster like you appreciates Ferris Bueller. Oh, I am impressed.
Well, what was that quote that he said?
That in the Breakfast Club, right?
I've not seen that one.
Oh man, I thought you were going to bat 1,000. But anyway, get back to Ferris Bueller. Look around.
But anyway, yeah, you got to stop and look around, otherwise you'll miss things. Basically was the moral of his comment, and that's kind of the same thing today. It's oh well, I'll go to Doug's class some other time. Oh, I'll watch that video. Oh, I'll learn this thing. I'll do this. I'll do that. I'll do tomorrow. Well, sometimes
the quote is, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the moral of the movie was how to skip school and scam people, and good lesson for us children of the '80s.
Hey Brady, I'm on fire right now. Don't ruin this. But anyway, tying back to my very first question. Why are they having us look up in the sky? Why are they having us look for spy balloons?
Yeah, one wonders on that. Now, I do have a theory about the balloons, and I apologize because Brady has heard this, and it's really kind of tongue in cheek, but it, in a sense, kind of has a nugget of truth. I tell people, I'm not surprised there's balloons everywhere. We're surrounded by a bunch of clowns.
There's some truth to that. The jokes write themselves with this administration, but spending two $500,000 missiles to shoot down a hobby balloon has got to be one of the probably best examples how incompetent these people are. And they did it because, and this is actually an important point, they did it because they were getting bad press. And people worry that things are getting really bad and that the government's as bad as it's ever been, and it's likely true, but they haven't won yet. And my evidence of that is that if they had already won, they still wouldn't be trying to lie to us.
Right,
they are
exactly.
out there. They are out there every day spinning new lies and BS to try to keep their minions convinced that this web of reality that they've spun, is still intact. And we just keep pulling at the threads day after day and exposing it, and hopefully more and more wake up. but it's hard. We're going against a very powerful enemy, and they've got a lot of institutions at their disposal to spin these lies and mistruths.
Well, my question is when you're getting bad press, why switch to aliens and spy balloons? That doesn't
the
seem
next
like
step.
exactly.
They think they're doing well,
Yeah.
actually. It's the next step. Oh, by the way, to answer Michelle, that her dad was stationed at North Island in Miramar back in the 60s. I was stationed at North Island in 85. So not because I was with a squadron. I was with a guided missile destroyer, but it was one of the newer ships, and there was no slots available at 32nd Street. So we were at North Island with the carriers and the squadrons.
One of my favorite
was he Top Gun? Because I believe the Top Gun.
Well, yeah, but Miramar, Top Gun was just a school at Miramar. Miramar at the time, until I don't know, about 20 years ago, was a naval air station, and that's where, and you had naval squadrons at Miramar and North Island. Then Miramar became a Marine Corps air station, at which time all of the Navy squadrons went over to North Island.
One of my favorite San Diego military stories was happened about 6-7 years ago. We were took my buddy's boat out to Point Loma, and we were scuba diving, and we drifted further south than we normally do, and we see this light in the distance, and there's not a whole lot of visibility in the Pacific Ocean around here, but we could make out the outline of a submarine. So you're not supposed to observe submarines going in and out. That's supposed to be top secret. So we didn't get any videos or anything like that, but we were all worried that we were going to military intelligence come knocking on our door to make sure we hadn't seen anything we weren't supposed to see.
I saw submarines all the time in Florida. They haven't tried to kill me yet.
They do not. They do not like us observing the subs when they go in and out of the bay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, I guess to wrap this up, because we have 4 minutes left, and I have to work tomorrow. This is like one of the craziest times, I think, in American history. I know nothing's new under the sun, but I mean, let's be honest.
Well, we thought it was pretty
George
crazy
Washington,
in the 70s and the 80s too.
George Washington didn't have to worry about Twitter and, let me say this. Things are more available and visualized today than they ever have been. Technology's only gotten better. I mean, someone was able to zoom into one of those spy planes and see like the little cameras and all that stuff on it. Supposedly, I guess, that could have been CGI'd, but I mean, it's.
Well, you're touching on one. You're touching on one.
Can't get a good video.
Yeah, I was going to say you're touching on one of my favorite themes, and when you're the powerful elite, one of the best weapons you have is the control of information. They lost that control with the invention of the printing press, and all of a sudden, literacy just exploded around the world, including the first books that were printed with the printing press were the Bibles, and that spurred the Reformation and the Renaissance, which led us to the great thinkers of the 16th and 17th century that inspired the Revolution and the Constitution. The powers that be were able to regain that control by buying up all the newspapers in the 19th century, and in the 20th century, they had power over the radio waves and then television. Well, that brings us to the internet. And the internet is, I call it Gutenberg 2.0. So even though big tech has tried to censor us, we're still getting the word out. They can't put the genie back in the bottle, or at least they haven't been able to. And it's people like us that are talking freely that is going to be the salvation of mankind, if God doesn't take care of that for us. But in the meantime,
let me wrap kind of our conversation up, because I do want to show you how things don't change as much as we think it does.
They've lost control of information now. What's that?
Yeah. Let me wrap up. Can you hear me okay, Warhamster? Because you kind of skidded out there.
Oh, did I make my point?
Yeah, you made your point, and then I started speaking because I thought you were done, and then you kind of like skittered back in and out, but you made your point. What I want to do, because I just want you guys to understand, I talk about this all the time, how, as Andrew so eloquently said earlier, nothing new is under the sun. I want to read 2 quick paragraphs from a book I'm working on. I'm working on a U.S. history book, but it really helps you understand how what was going on then compared to now. While the technology may be a little different, what was going on really wasn't. So real quick, if you don't mind, it's a handful of a pair of sentences. One of the demands by the insurgents during Shays' rebellion that concerned the political leaders between the end of the Annapolis Convention and the commencement of the Philadelphia Convention was that many of the rebels wanted to seize the property of the rich and redistribute it to the poor and desperate. In a letter dated October 23rd, 1786, one of George Washington's trusted friends and a former artillery commander, General Henry Knox, advised Washington the rebels see the weakness of government and thus feel free to pay little, if any, taxes. According to Knox, the rebels believe that since the joint exertions of all protected the property of the United States from Great Britain, it rightfully belongs to all. The rebels, Knox explained, believe that anyone who attempts opposition to this creed is an enemy of equity and justice and ought to be swept from the face of the earth, unquote. Collectivist thinking that today we would call socialism or social justice existed among pockets of the population in early America. Some people of the time period ignored property markings that would help themselves to timber on property owned by another. Such disregard for property was a common problem for large landowners in the backcountry of each state. Washington called those kind of folk a wretched lot, not to be trusted, and certainly not to be the bone and sinew of a great nation. Thought that was kind of appropriate. Like I said, as much as things change, they stay the same.
Yeah, human nature is hasn't changed all that much in a few thousand years.
Yeah, history does repeat itself, but there's always some new plot twists that go along the way with the revision.
One of my favorite sayings is history does not repeat itself. Historians merely repeat each other.
So it's like the game of telephone. That makes sense.
Something along those lines. And remember who writes the history. That's why we are blessed to have so many historians who actually know how to find real information and to demonstrate that what we were taught in school books is not the way things actually happened. Yeah, you get a forensic historian on your side. We've got enough of them running around there discovering truth, and these are the people I follow on the internet. Mm-hmm. There's some really bright minds out there, but the truth is not what we've been taught, and we know who controls the flow of the information. Same people that who donate to all the schools and the libraries, and we are seeing this as we speak. Books are disappearing from libraries, especially the kind of books that we like to read. That is happening in universities around the country as we speak.
It's not any chance it's just always being checked out.
No, especially the nature of the books that are disappearing, and the ones that are remaining are the woke books. So yeah, it's
speaking of books,
fortunately, I own a lot of those books that they keep trying to make to disappear. So,
well, that was my segue. Doug, don't you have a new book coming out?
I am working on a number of books. I do have a new book. It's out called Repeal Democracy. And it is available. I am working on a couple of books. My history book is something I'm also teaching, so I have to be up on writing it because my students demand it. Because each week I have homeschool high schoolers that need their next chapter to read. So I am working on a history book that should be out by the summer. I'm going to be updating my Constitution handouts for my classes as a book. But an idea I had a couple nights ago, and I sat down and wrote like 6 chapters because I just felt the need to kind of get into it. And I'll work on it when I have a little extra time here and there. I call it The Faith of America. And I'm really kind of getting deeper into, what the faith of the founders, what the faith of the settlers were. What is this a quote unquote Christian country? What does it mean when someone says Judeo-Christian foundation? Is that true? Is that what they meant? Or is it just a Christian foundation from their point of view? When did that first emerge? All of that type of stuff. I'm getting into what the faith of America is, has been, and should be. And like I said, I sat down a couple nights ago, I think it was Wednesday after I got home from my class, and had the idea, sat down, and then I just was up past midnight just ripping out like 6 chapters. So the Faith of America will be one, hopefully, in the near future as well.
I am pleased to announce I am now through the 3rd chapter of my first book, and I'm starting to make some progress on it. I've spent months. I've been talking about it for a long time. Been gathering up the homework, putting up with all the pins on my board to do all the connections. And what I'm writing about is basically those who rule us. And I'm going to do an overview of the last several centuries and how this elite ruling class came to usurp the Constitution and put us where we are today. And it'll be high level. I'm not going to go too deep on any of the subjects, but I will be providing resources for anybody who wants to dig deeper. For all the books and articles and videos that I've watched, I've got them all linked up. So that is
on the cover, it's going to be a hamster with a gold crown and a scepter in his hand.
I don't know if we're going to have a hamster on that one.
Well,
of course, I jest.
Well, guess what? I have some news. Guess who's also writing a book?
Your sister.
Nobody. I'm actually putting a close to this book for tonight. All right.
Oh, okay.
So, I was trying to find a funnier way to do that, but I end up butchering it. That's okay. Anyway, all right. So this was a great show. Appreciate all the 12 people that are there. Please invite your friends.
I noticed that you've got you're two away from 100 people subscribing to this channel, which is pretty impressive considering. And so those of you that are watching right now, if you have not subscribed, pop that sucker over 100. Subscribe. And while you do it, hit the little bell. That'll give you reminders.
Yeah.
And it's not just these shows, now. Andrew's got other shows too. This is his channel. So, hit that. When we come back next week, I want that number of subscribers to be over 100.
How about we do over 1,000? Let's go there.
Well, hey, okay. It takes steps before you can start running. Okay.
So we can't sign up. We can't sign off until I tell everyone my news.
All right, go ahead.
This Sunday, February 26th, I will be getting baptized, and I am very much looking forward to that. And my good friend Douglas V. Gibbs will be attending, and I appreciate you coming. It means a lot to me, brother.
I told my wife after church we got somewhere to go, and then I told her, and so hopefully she will be coming. She sounded like she was.
Oh yeah, tell her I insist. We can't do it without her.
Well, I aside from the fact that my good friend is being baptized, my wife, she while I don't want to make her sound like she's crass or anything, but when you dangle Joe's Crab Shack over in front of her, also that I usually get her with food.
I made reservations this afternoon. We've got a table for 15. So
all right, very good.
We are all set.
Now I'm looking forward to it. I'm very excited. And you are a brave soul because that water, and I know you're a diver, you're used to cold water, but we'll be finishing off with a storm about then. So and it's February, so I'm going to guess that water is going to be a little on the chilly side.
Yeah, I got a bottle of schnapps I'll be bringing for right when I get out. Yeah, this is going to be a tough one, but everyone keeps asking me, "Are you going to wear a wetsuit?" I go, "Come on, you got to know me better than that. I'm not going to have a ceremony this important and wimp out in any way, shape, or form." So I'll be there in Speedo. No, just kidding. I got board shorts, and no, but I will. It's going to be a cold one. Well, and hey, you got to give Tyler, the guy who's baptizing me, you got to give him a lot of credit because he's going in the water too.
Yeah, so. Exactly. And Tyler's good people, man. I'm excited that he's the one doing it. For those of you who don't know, Tyler ran for office locally. He's also a pastor and just an all-around great American and individual. Absolutely love him. All right, audience, we're ready to sign off. Thanks for spending the time with us. Anything else, gentlemen, to say before I send us off?
Doug, will you be in a Speedo as well?
No, I'm going to be in jeans, shirt, and a very thick jacket. Now that said, anything else, gentlemen?
I think I'm good.
Cheers. Have
all right. United we stand. Combined we kick butt. God bless America, my friends, and God bless you. And congratulations, Brady. Well, I can't wait till Sunday. That is huge. For all of you, thank you for spending the time with us. We love you. We appreciate you. Remember, we try to be here every week, but remember, this channel is not just this show. Andrew's got some other great stuff he puts here. So be sure to subscribe. Be sure to hit that notification bell so that anytime Andrew has either Brady and I for the Constitutional Roundtable or anything else, you know about it and you can show up to hear the great content. As for me, Mr. Constitution Douglas V. Gibbs, appreciate you, love you, and I'm out of here.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Cheers.